Good evening. Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Statman are not able to attend tonight's meeting. I'd like to call to order the December 8th, 2021 regular school committee meeting at 5:31. At this time, I would entertain a motion for the purpose of entering an executive session to review and approve executive meeting minutes and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with employee groups and/or personnel matters. The school committee will reconvene in the regular open session meeting at 6:30 p.m. in the auditorium. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
And I will second.
I have a motion and a second to enter executive session. Mr. Parsons, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Garabedian, how do you vote?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. Motion carried. We will reconvene at 6 p.m. in the auditorium for the John and Abigail Adams Awards, and 6:30 for the regular school committee meeting back here in LG1.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Malone. I'm Superintendent of Schools. I want to welcome you here this evening for just as one of our favorite evenings of the year to really celebrate our students' academic achievement specific to MCAS. We have a tremendous amount to celebrate. We weren't able to celebrate this type of event in person last year, so we're just very happy to be here in person. And usually we've also done kind of all grades in their recognition, and this year we decided to split it up and give some special recognition at the high school level. And there'll be a couple different award types that we're handing out this evening, and we'll go through that. First of all, I just want to introduce some of the people that are here this evening. Once again, I'm Chris Malone, Superintendent of Schools. We're also joined by our Vice Chair of the School Committee, Ms. Shannon Demos, Ms. Bridget Garabedian from the School Committee, and Mr. Nick Parsons from the School Committee. Also here with us is Assistant Superintendent Brenda Reagan, who will be helping out in the ceremony, and the Administrative Assistant, Ms. Gail Johnson, who will also be helping out. And we have several principals here this evening. So although these are high school recognition awards, I think we join in as a community, particularly at the elementary and the middle schools, to really show the pride that we have in the students that have progressed through our grades. But most of all, thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you, parents, for your dedication, for your support to your children. We hope that you really see an evening like this as a payoff in that investment. And we just couldn't be prouder of the students here tonight. We've got a couple different categories we're going to look at. The first category we're going to look at is the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship, which I'll explain what that is in a moment. And the second level we're going to look at is perfect scores and outstanding achievement in MCAS recognition for the test taking. So again, I think when we think about this, there is a tradition in the state of Massachusetts and in the town of Terksbury of really looking at MCAS scores to measure achievement, and we've been very proud of some of those results. But I think for the students here this evening, there's been an extra element of difficulty around this pandemic and how the tests were taken and how students could prepare themselves. This has really been done in a non-traditional fashion over the past couple of years, and I can't thank these students enough for putting in the dedication that it takes to be successful in these elements. And although we're specifically talking about MCAS in this ceremony, it's a strong indication that the students who have done well in this scenario are doing well in other areas, and we hope that's true. And we just couldn't be more proud of them. Specifically, the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship. The John and Abigail Adams Scholarship provides tuition credit for up to 8 semesters of undergraduate education at a Massachusetts state college or university, based on student scores on MCAS tests. The scholarship covers tuition only. Fees and room and board are not included. The scholarship must be used within 6 years of a student's high school graduation. But I can't think of a more significant achievement than demonstrating academic excellence in the state of Massachusetts, reflecting in that by providing a scholarship to state schools. And for some of the juniors and seniors that are here tonight, that may not sound like a lot to you, but to us adults, that sounds like a lot. Believe me, so it's great. I am going to begin to call off the names of the students who are going to be honored with the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship. What I'd like you to do, if your name is called, is to come up front and you'll connect with Ms. Regan or Ms. Johnson here at the front. We have different awards for different elements of what we're recognizing tonight. And then stay here once you've received that, and we're going to place you on the risers so that not only we can get a picture, but Mom and Dad can get a picture of everybody. Okay? So if your name is called, just come up to this section in front. Ms. Regan and Ms. Johnson will get you situated. You'll receive your award, and then we'll place you on the risers, and we'll pause between the John and Abigail Adams scholarships and those recognized for achievement in MCAS. So with that, those students receiving the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship: Milo Bobotis, Aaron Conley, Jason Cook, Alec Cranston, Courtney Curtin, Nicolette Evangelista, Madison Orgioni, Lily Gigante, Paige Harrington, Hannah Kosmersky, Cassidy McDonald, Mason Nguyen, Ava Piccolo, Obada Sheikh Kamas, Jack Stadler, Quang Tran, Jacqueline Vidiello, Leela Wan, Abigail Yang, it's so exciting I think I can hear music. Ladies and gentlemen, those are our winners of the John and Abigail Adams Scholarships. Parents, you can move up front to take a picture. School committee members, I'm not sure, I think maybe you want to get in the picture. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, those students receiving the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship. Great job, everyone. We have two more subgroups in relation to academic excellence as related to MCAS. Mostly referring to grade 11 students, but there are a couple of seniors in here as well. But they're into two groups: those students who receive a perfect score and those students exceeding expectations in two subject areas. I'm going to start off with the first group, which is those students receiving a perfect score of 560 in the current grade 11 and 12. For parents, the concept of obtaining a perfect score on the toughest statewide academic test in the country is a significant accomplishment. It's a speaks truly to the dedication of the students that we have here tonight. Through difficult times, they still applied themselves, dedicated themselves, and performed during a very strenuous test. And we're certainly very proud of their accomplishments and proud to have them here tonight. Once again, those students receiving a perfect score of 560. Anaru Arlaka, perfect score, mathematics. Olivia Ward, perfect score, English language arts. John Baker, perfect in mathematics and exceeded expectations in English language arts. Alec Cranston, perfect score in mathematics, exceeded expectations in English language arts. Hannah Qualter, perfect score in mathematics, exceeded expectations in English language arts. Daria Mirabani, perfect score in mathematics, exceeded expectations in English language arts. And finally, Meisan Wen, perfect score in mathematics, exceeded expectations in English language arts. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the students who achieved a perfect score of 560 in high school MCAS. If parents want to come up and take a picture, school committee, if you want to join in with the picture, but if parents want to come up. Great. Thank you, students. Once again, those students who received our final group this evening is those students who exceeded expectations in 2 subject areas, in English language arts and mathematics. And again, I can't emphasize enough, this is a significantly challenging test. Most adults here tend to shudder at the thought of having to take a test at that level in high school. And these students have excelled at it, and we're certainly very proud of them and appreciative of all their efforts. So again, following students, please come forward for exceeded expectations in 2 subject areas. Callie Finnegan, English language arts and mathematics. Cecilia Ho, English language arts and mathematics. Kylie Kennedy, English language arts and mathematics. Gabriella Lightfield, English language arts and mathematics. Maximus Moticchio, English language arts and mathematics. Maria Mirabani, English language arts and mathematics. And finally, David Penny, English language arts and mathematics. once again, these are the students that exceeded expectations in 2 subject areas, English Language Arts and Mathematics. Great job, students. Parents, if you'd like to come up and take a quick picture and join by the school committee, please feel free to do so. Thank you, students. Great. And this reading's finished. Sorry. Once again, we're so proud of the students who are on here this evening. We're also so happy that we can have this celebration in person. Typically, we have a bit of a reception as part of this. Due to not being all the way out of COVID yet, we've kind of bypassed that at this point. But we're certainly just extremely happy and proud that we can honor the students here in person and honor you as family members to be here this evening. It's truly a reflection of the dedication of this community that has to education. We appreciate that very much. We appreciate you for being out here on a cold Wednesday night. We thank you. And at this time, the school committee does need to resume their meeting in LGI 1. But we do want to thank you very much for being here tonight. And congratulations, all students.
I'd like to reconvene the regular school committee meeting at 6:31 p.m. Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Statman are unable to attend tonight's meeting. Mr. Sullivan has asked that I read a statement on his behalf. Tewksbury residents, students, and family members, my son was very fortunate to be selected to represent the Tewksbury Youth Football Program at an All-Star late November and is participating in games in Florida this week. I learned of this late in November with the short notice, all that is going on, and with full confidence in the committee, I am confident that my absence didn't necessitate changing the December meeting. My colleagues are capable, and I thank them in my absence for all they do. I take great pride in representing the citizens of Tewksbury, and this is the first time in 5 years that I unfortunately cannot attend the meeting. I do want to reassure the committee that I am fully vested in the schools and the community and look forward to the January meeting. In the meantime, you are in very capable hands with Mrs. Demos at the helm and our school committee members. Sincerely and Merry Christmas, Keith. The committee just recognized the recipients of the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship and the 2021 MCAS top performing Tewksbury Memorial High School students in the Christine McGrath Performing Arts Center. It was definitely one of those moments to warm your heart. It's a proud moment for both the families, the staff members, and the students that attended. It is that culmination of all the hard work from elementary school on, and very proud to see all that attended this evening's event. With that being said, the December 8th, 2021 regular school committee meeting will be televised and recorded and may be viewed live on Comcast Channel 22 and Verizon Channel 34 or on YouTube, tewksburytv.com. Under the open meeting law, the public is permitted to make an audio or video recording of an open session at a public meeting. At this time, I would ask if anyone is recording tonight's meeting to please identify himself or herself. Thank you. Seeing none, I'd like to ask Jack Statman to lead the committee in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, before we go any further on to the agenda, I'd like to take the opportunity to make a statement on behalf of the Terksbury School Committee. To this point, the school committee and administration have not commented publicly about labor negotiations with our teachers in the ESP bargaining units, out of deference to the ground rules to which both sides agreed. These ground rules contain the following provision. All bargaining sessions will be held in executive session. All members of the bargaining team will maintain confidentiality. However, the parties may discuss negotiations with their respective constituents as long as it's made clear that such information is not to be discussed publicly. However, we recently became aware that the TTA has published some information concerning our negotiations, and in fairness, we believe we should provide a school district response. In regards to a TTA statement that said, despite beginning the negotiation process last year, the school committee has not been able to agree to the TTA's offers for a fair contract, nor have they presented equitable offers or counters in return. The school district response is, we respectfully suggest that the audience targeted by this TTA message cannot reach a conclusion as to whether the school committee has presented an equitable offer unless one has seen what is actually in the school committee's offer. If the TTA waives the above referenced ground rule, we'd be happy to furnish the actual proposal made by the school committee, and readers can then themselves draw their own conclusions as to whether the proposal is equitable. The parties met on 8 occasions from February 2021 to June of 2021. The school committee offered to continue negotiations over the summer, and the TTA indicated that it could resume negotiations August 25th. From that point, the parties met on 3 additional occasions and were unable, despite those efforts, to settle the contract. The school committee was of the opinion that the offer on the table was fair and requested that the TTA submit the proposal to its membership for ratification vote, but we understand this has not occurred. TTA statement also said that the TTA members have been working since September without a contract. As a school district, our response to this is that the terms of the current contract stay in effect as the current terms and conditions of employment until a new contract is reached. An additional statement that came through the TTA said, at this point, the school committee and administration have left the bargaining table despite it being their jobs to negotiate a contract with the TTA. Negotiations cannot happen without both parties present. This leaves educators across Terksbury stranded without a contract. The Terksbury Public School Committee and administration have opted to attempt a process called mediation run by the Department of Labor Relations. Instead of working with the TTA to create a fair contract, the school committee and administration have decided to pass on an opportunity to do this necessary part of their job. The school district response to these claims in quotes. The school committee shares the TTA's desire for a settled contract and is not walking away from the negotiation table. This is not what happens when a party petitions for mediation. Mediation occurs when, despite the best efforts of the parties to settle a contract, they have reached an impasse. When a party files for mediation, which can be done jointly by both parties, as our negotiation team requested but was declined by the TTA, the result is that a skilled and trained facilitator comes to the table to help the parties move past their impasse and settle the contract. No one walks away from the table. The mediator joins the parties at the table. We think that having a mediator at the table represents the most expedient path to a settled contract, and we have mediation scheduled for December 20th and January 7th. We hope that we have a settled contract by the end of this process. Thank you. At this time, I would turn the floor over to Mr. Jack Statman for our Terksbury Memorial High School update, student update.
Thank you for having me back. The Team HS Drama Club has started rehearsals for their new upcoming production of Forbidden Broadway. Cast and crew members are excited to bring this to you all sometime in the near future. The Student Council is still holding their weekly meetings on Thursday mornings. The Spirit Day Dippin' Dots Award is back on. All senior class students should expect to receive their Dippin' Dots on Friday during lunch. The morning update is still broadcasting live every morning. You can tune in on YouTube to catch the latest in-school updates. And the International Club recently helped out at Haverhill's Jingle Bell 5K, all members dressed up in their holiday gear to help hand out water to the runners. In late October, the high school, never mind, that happened in October. Our high school DECA team is preparing for their district competition. Our best and brightest will go up against other schools for the chance to compete in the state competition. I hope my fellow members have the best of luck during their testing and in their preparation for role plays. And that's all for today.
Excellent, thank you. Any of my fellow committee members have any comments or concerns regarding the report?
None at this time.
Ms. Garabedian?
No questions, thank you, Jack.
Thank you very much, Jack. Tonight we have several presentations here at the committee meeting, and the first presentation that we have is Ms. Dorothy Presser. She is the field director of the Massachusetts Association of the School Committees, and she's going to speak to us tonight in regards to beginning our process for our superintendent search.
Thanks.
Good evening, and thanks for having me here tonight to tell you a little bit about the search process and to answer any questions that you may have. I'm going to start talking a little bit about the search process, starting out with the fact that obviously hiring a new superintendent is one of the primary responsibilities of a school committee, as you know, along with the budget and policy and so forth. And it's a process which does not really have any specific guidelines that you need to follow. It's really very much up to the committee how that process goes. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what your choices are, what a typical process looks like, and also address the fact that I believe that you'll be thinking about a new superintendent with Dr. Malone's retirement at the end of February.
Yes.
Which leaves you little time to do much of a process before that, which means you'll also probably be needing to think about an interim superintendent until you're able to complete a process for a permanent superintendent. So address both those aspects a little bit. When you think about the fact that the decision of who the superintendent is lies very much with the school committee, and the process that you get there also lies very much with the school committee. So you could appoint someone, or you could do a full, what we would think of as a full search. And there's, a continuum obviously in between those two choices. Generally, particularly when you have a longstanding superintendent who's retiring and you haven't really thought about that had to think about that luckily for a while, the general process is to engage in a full search. That search would involve starting with getting a feeling for what the community is looking for in terms of a superintendent. Actually, at the very beginning, the decision that you would need to make is, do you want to do this on your own, or do you want to hire a search firm to help you out? Doing it on your own means that you really have to have the capacity to do a lot of the administrative work on your own. You're members of MASC, which means you could get a lot of technical support for MASC as part of your membership, but it means that very much the legwork and a lot of the processes stay within the district. You wouldn't have a consultant to help take care of that administrative work or guide you through a lot of the decisions that need to be made along the way. So in deciding to hire a search firm, very often committees will put out an RFP, get a few proposals, and then decide who they would like to hire for the search firm. Once you've made that decision, if you're going forward with a full search, sometimes committees will decide, well, before we do a full search, we'll do an internal search. And if the internal search doesn't garner any candidates, then we'll go for a full search. Most generally, the beginning of the search starts with looking at a calendar for how long it takes. A full search would generally take roughly somewhere between 3 and 4 months to complete before you're ready to decide who to hire. And you start out by sort of taking the pulse of the community, doing focus groups within the community, focus groups and surveys to help you understand as the school committee, the community involving all stakeholders. So it would be staff and as well as parents and as well as the full community. You know, what do people see as the challenges, the successes in Tewksbury that you would want to make sure are addressed, or, you know, the successes that you want to make sure continue? From that information, the school committee would develop the advertising and the job description of the person they were seeking. Then the advertising would go out and resumes would be collected. During that time period, you would also be putting together a search committee. The search committee, again, you want to be representative of a broad array of stakeholders in the community. So there's a balance there of not making the committee too large. So once it gets too large, it gets harder to make decisions, but representative. So generally, what we see search committee composed of a couple of school committee members, administrators, teachers, parents, community members. And then you always want to try and balance like school side with community side so that the voices have some equity in the decision making. Search committee that is part of the process that is confidential, would happen in executive session that helps attract candidates who are interested in the position but might not want their name out in public to begin with. Search committee would present to the school committee the number of finalists with the requirements that the school committee has defined. Then the process from that point becomes a public process where the school committee would be perhaps visiting the districts of any finalists. Any finalists would be coming to Tewksbury to have a chance to get to know the community a little bit more, a meet and greet, and then a final interview with the school committee, and you would make your selection. So that's sort of a quick and dirty review of the process. I just want to go back for a second and talk about the interim position. So given the sort of the fact that the holidays are coming, right, and that the interim position would need to be filled relatively quickly, I think there would be two options that you would be looking at, either filling it with a senior administrator, an internal senior administrator, or looking for a retired superintendent who would be willing to fill the position for a short amount of time. If it's someone who is a current administrator in the district, you would want to make sure two things: that they would be able to apply for the position permanently, and that should they decide not to, or should they not be the final candidate, they would be able to return to the position that they had in the district. What questions do you have?
I'll turn that over to my fellow committee members. Ms. Garabedian.
Hi, Dorothy. Thanks so much for coming.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's great to see you. So I have a lot of questions, but I'll start just with, in terms of the focus groups, community meetings, surveys, things like that, when does that generally start?
So generally that would start at the very beginning of the search process. Once you've decided what kind of a search process you're going to have, but the first thing you would do would be to create the calendar for the search, the timeline. And the focus groups are generally the first step in that. Generally, there's an online survey as well as focus groups, and those two, the information gathered from those is put together to create sort of a leadership profile that then the school committee would consider as they're deciding how to advertise for the position. So that would really be about the first step in the process.
Okay. And is there some application for that where internally the district would do some sort of self-assessment in terms of what the needs are?
You could certainly do that. Certainly feedback from your administrators would be appropriate. And you also have probably some internal documentation, right, of what your goals are and the progress that is where you are in your goals so far, that would help inform that.
Okay. And then in terms of things that other districts have done well with their searches and things like that, is there some sort of shared, like, knowledge base for how different districts maybe have been very successful in doing their searches recently, like maybe post-COVID times?
So can you tell me a little bit more what your thinking is on that?
Well, I'm listening to, you say that we, kind of like the typical timeline and things
Yeah.
like that. There's a piece of me that wonders, do we need to reinvent some things, or are there kind of standardization of this process?
Yeah,
that
well,
might apply?
if you are working with a consultant, I think that what the consultant groups do is really pretty standard. It's kind of the process that I've outlined.
Okay.
Some of that success comes in, are you hitting the right groups to talk about as focus groups? Are you appropriately vetting the candidates once you know you have them? Are you taking the information from the focus groups and your own information about what you see the needs of the district are to define the candidate you're looking for? I think one of the things that's true about superintendent searches is you're going to find the candidate you're looking for. The question is, did you define it right? Did you define what you were looking for right to have a good match? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And then the other piece, I think you were helpful in defining when things stay private and then when they go public. So that was very helpful. I appreciated that piece. But I think that's it for right now. I may think of something later. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Parsons?
Yes. For gathering information from the school end of things, do you have any recommendations there, like who to survey, who to get involved in a search committee potentially?
Yep, so in terms of gathering the information, generally there's a survey that goes out to anyone who wants to answer it, no matter what their stakeholder role is, right? And the first question would be, what's your role as a stakeholder? So you can kind of see, how the questions are being answered on the survey by different groups. And then the committee would define who are we going to go out and talk to. So I know on searches that I do, very often we're meeting with, we're certainly meeting a number of times with faculty, certainly meeting with administrators, and on the school side, and anyone else that the school committee feels that it's appropriate to meet with. So, when we do searches, there's there's only so many focus groups we'll do. You decide who they are. You decide how many there are. You decide who they're with.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question that my colleagues have not asked is, I really feel strongly about surveying the various stakeholders across the community prior to beginning this process. I know when I previously sat on a superintendent search, we had like a Google form or sheet that we had to state what our role would be and what we could contribute, things like that. I'm not sure if that information to be part of the committee was something that was started from the school committee end or from the firm's end. Like, would our charge be to create a survey for the families and pass it out before we get to the point of having our committee in place? Or is that something that it would be part of the firm that we partner with to then create that to go out for us
So
once
I
they
can
sit and
talk
talk
more
with us?
specifically about how we do it, which
Okay.
I'm going to assume is similar.
Okay,
We have a survey that we give to you and say, tailor it. Here's a basic survey, tailor it.
Okay.
If you want extra things asked, if you want things taken out, it's your survey.
okay.
And so far as putting together the search committee, which I think, to me, that's like two separate questions that
Yes.
you're asking.
Yes,
So generally, the school committee would put a call out, for lack of a better way to say it, and saying, define who's going to be on the committee in terms of, how many administrators, how many teachers, how many parents. So not defining the people, right, but defining the
numbers.
positions.
Yeah.
And then generally asking people to give a little bit about their background, whatever you define when you would work on that with the search consultant. But generally, it's, a letter saying, what do you bring? Can you submit a letter? What would you bring to the process?
Yeah.
And in the end, the school committee makes the selections of who's on the search committee.
So then we would have a jumping point to start
Yeah,
with, but we could
yeah.
tailor it to the needs and priorities of Tewksbury.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not a blanket.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yep.
Because
I think one of the things that's important for you to remember is no matter how you go forward, whether you do it yourself or use a search firm, it's your search. You need to keep control of the search.
Right.
And make sure that it's fitting your needs.
Right. We're just under such a time constraint right now between now and February. I just want to make sure that I have the process clear as far as, the end goal being, this date and how we're working backwards to attain that goal.
Yeah,
So I just want to
yeah.
make sure that I'm clear
I think
on
that to have, so first of all, once you decide who the superintendent is going to be, presumably they have another position they need to give notice.
Right.
So to have a permanent person in place for the end of February, I think is pretty much an impossibility.
So we would be able to just sort of differentiate our interim search versus our long-term search.
Yep.
And I
think that
that's
would be two separate
yeah.
processes.
Absolutely. That's everything I have for tonight. I thank you for coming in and for sharing all this with us.
Okay. And if any other questions that you may have, you know where to find me, so please feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next on the agenda this evening, Mr. Bernard is here to present the out-of-state field trip updates for us. And joined by some staff as well. Thank you for coming.
Quick introduction. So good evening. Thank you all for having us here this evening. I'm joined by Lindsay Bowden-White, who is leading our trip to Costa Rica, and Bailey Mahoney, also a teacher at the high school like Lindsay, who is our travel coordinator and has been working with me this year on the planning for the National Parks trip. The Costa Rica trip, as I think you all know, was something that had already been planned for 2020, but was put on hold given the impact of the pandemic. But we believe we have some information that's valuable for all of you to consider as we think about these two trips proposed for April, and they largely center, the information we're going to share with you tonight largely centers around how EF, the tour company that we are working with, is responding to the impact of the pandemic. So I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay and Bailey. I'll stay here too to join in answering any questions that you might have, but I think the two of them are prepared to lead you through the brief presentation that I believe you all have in your packets.
Hi. Hello. Thank you for having us. So with EF, and we've talked, Lindsay and I have been in touch with both our international and domestic tour reps throughout this whole process. Unfortunately, they could not join us tonight. But EF has a very robust COVID travel protocol that they have in place. So we kind of want to just hit on some of the highlights. And the biggest part being this first part, their COVID care promise. So in the unfortunate event that a student would develop symptoms of COVID-19 while on the tour, EF has set up this process where they would facilitate medical attention and testing. If they need to quarantine the traveler, then EF covers the cost of the hotel, meals, it reschedules flights for them, flies out a parent if the traveler tests positive and is under the age of 18, as well as provides support from an EF representative. So that's kind of the big piece that they've really worked on to make sure that if something happens on the tour, that they have a process in place to keep our students safe and not have to worry about all the little things like eating, where they're staying, where they're isolating. All of that will be taken care of by the EF team. Students will be required to sign a COVID safe traveler agreement, which we have to have at least 30 days prior to the departure. We have a sample in the packets you received, I believe, correct?
Yeah, this should be it.
Okay. All travelers are required to bring proof of their negative test results using a sample taken no more than 72 hours prior to their scheduled flight departure. And then for vaccines, at this time, the domestic trip is not requiring a vaccine. And EF will let us know if that changes. And EF will soon be letting parents on the Costa Rica trip know that vaccination is required to go international.
Yeah, they will be sending out that email, so it'll be coming from EF, that any international trip you need to be vaccinated for.
As far as their flexibility policy, we have until December 27th of this year for Costa Rica or December 28th for the National Parks trip to either change the destination, postpone the tour until the summer, move the trip to next school year. Additionally, if any individual student wants to cancel their trip, the same dates apply, and they can either get a voucher or a refund minus a cancellation fee. So the same things we talked about last year when we moved the Costa Rica trip the first time. Those same policies are still in place. If it's after those dates, then it would be up to us to enact the code peace of mind policy. And that goes with if the government says, hey, you can't travel, or there's a mandated quarantine about returning, or any other travel ban that gets put into place, we have that available as well. I believe that is also in the packets.
Mm-hmm.
So just a kind of background on the communication with travelers and their families. We originally held our first parent meeting for Costa Rica in the fall of the 2019 school year for a 2021 departure date. And then we had a follow-up meeting in the fall of last year after our decision to postpone the trip to 2022, which had the cancellation policy, repayment options, and other that information that we had at that time. And right now we have a meeting set to be held shortly after this meeting to discuss the most recent updates. Some of that's kind of gotten moved around because we've been switching chaperones, because obviously I'm not chaperoning the trip anymore. And just to kind of see what's been happening with their policies with COVID and those kind of things. So we're hoping to schedule that meeting, reschedule that meeting from November 17th to later this week. We currently have 18 students enrolled on the trip, plus 3 faculty chaperones. And EF has made both of our tours private tours, meaning we're not partnering with any other outside school groups. It will be just TMHS students. The National Parks trip with parents, the most current information we had was shared with them at the original meeting in October of this year. We've not had a follow-up meeting. We are waiting to see what our final enrollment number was going to be, which now is 28 students, and that deadline was November 30th. And we will be having a follow-up meeting with parents hopefully sometime next week. And we have 28 students plus 3 faculty members on that trip as well. Like I said, it will also be a private tour, meaning no other groups will be joining us.
No, that's good.
Okay, so for reimbursements and refunds, options for individual travelers would be a travel voucher that they get all of the money they've paid into this voucher, and they can use it for a future trip, or any EF product. So if our seniors have to cancel, they can get a voucher that would go towards the EF college tours. I've been on them, they're great. They have family tours. The vouchers are also transferable to other siblings or parents if they want to take the adult EF trips, which I've heard are also fantastic. I've never been on one of those, but they have options there. If they want just a straight cash refund, it's everything minus the $500 cancellation fee. For Costa Rica, for the national parks, it's all monies minus the $350 cancellation fee. Excuse me. And then for the students who did not use a voucher to enroll, we do have 1 or 2 that had a voucher from a previous trip that they used for the national parks trip. So they would get all monies minus the $500 back for that. And families who have the Travel Protection Plus plan may be eligible for higher cash refunds. I think we have just a handful of students who sign up for the Plus version. We require all students to have the basic travel protection plan. And then our options as a district would be to push the trips to summer of 2022 to give a little more time, a little more breathing room, and that would still allow our seniors to travel. I know a lot of them have had this trip pushed out once, especially Costa Rica. It's mostly seniors. And so if we push to the summer rather than next full school year, it gives them the opportunity to still travel because they've been saving and planning and paying since 2019 to be able to do so. And we can also change locations if we would need to do that as well.
That's it?
Yep. Okay.
Well done, Bailey.
That was really fast.
Excellent.
So,
Thank you very much. At this time, I will touch base with the committee members for any questions. Ms. Garabedian?
my big question is, if you do move to the summer, are your chaperones able to and interested in still participating?
For myself, yes. I don't know about the other two on my trip, but I'll be available.
That'd be a conversation we'd have to have with them. I know I have a waiting list
Yeah.
of teachers who want to chaperone, so
Oh,
if we
okay.
have to make some changes.
We would get chaperones.
Well, chaperones are not an issue.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other, if you did have to push out to summer of 2022, would that also move back your, the dates for, you know, final, like the 28th to the December dates or whatever you have for?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Those dates are set based on, the traditional EF policy is 110 days before your departure date. So it would just reset that count, however many days. I don't do math, but it would change it back to that.
And how would you make any decisions? Would it be based on feedback from the families, or in terms of moving the dates, or just trying to go
I would
forward?
think so. I would think we would have a better understanding once we hold the parent meetings and once they receive the email from EF about the vaccination policy, especially for Costa Rica.
Right. Based on how the national park trip, because that's been recent within the last 2 months, based on how our original parent meeting went, most parents are still pretty gung-ho about the trip going as is. But if we had to push it, that would be a discussion I think we'd want to do based on families in town.
Okay. No further questions. Thanks for staying on top of all this.
Mr. Malone?
Yes, Madam Chair. Just first of all, thank you to the Terksbury Memorial High School staff for just doing a great job organizing this. I was actually able to speak with some higher-ups in EF late last week about some of these elements. They have a very comprehensive package in response to COVID, and I know Ms. Garabedian just mentioned that kind of drop dead date of when you have to make a determination. In recent trips, they've actually extended that because of different variants that have developed in different countries. They're very flexible. They're monitoring what's going on in the world. They feel comfortable that if there's a particular country, a particular section that comes under immediate concern, that they can alter or move that trip, or certainly allow the student or the family, it's not just the student, but the family, to use what has been invested in that trip towards another trip. None of this is foolproof, and I think, you know, the one piece that I think our parents have to realize is that if their child either, you know, contracts a virus in another country or becomes ill, likely they're going to want to travel there to be with the child, and just to be thoughtful of that. And in many cases, EF will pay for that to actually occur. But, you know, I think our parents need to understand that, you know, in much more different than other years, if it's not an unreasonable expectation on any student trip, if there was ever an issue, that a parent would go to the child. But with the propensity around isolation and all these other pieces, I think our parents need to have a higher level of awareness of this isn't just my child's trip, this is our trip. We've all got to kind of be invested for that amount of days that they're away and so forth. But I've been fairly impressed with EF's response to this. Again, nothing's foolproof. No one knows where these numbers are going, either in the Western United States or in Costa Rica. We'll talk in a few minutes about Washington, D.C. We can't predict it. We just can't. And unfortunately, if we do have to cancel, people are going to lose some money. But I think, that would be probably predicated on us making a decision on our own that it's not safe for our kids to go at that particular point beyond that 100-day window, which I think we need to reserve the right to do if we feel it's not safe. But I do think EF has some stopgaps built in there to support us.
So Chris, I just have a question though, with them saying that we can push off into the summer when the seniors will have graduated. What does that look like as far as the fact that now they are no longer a Tewksbury Public School student?
That, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, if they have a voucher for a trip, not only could they go as long as they're not a student, they could hand it off to their parents, they could hand it off to a cousin, they could hand it off to someone else. The difference would be, to your point, is those individuals would no longer be Tewksbury Public School students, and we'd have Tewksbury Public School staff chaperoning a trip basically with non-Tewksbury Public School students. Go ahead if you have a...
So past precedent, we did the trip to Germany, Austria, Switzerland. And I do believe recent graduates, because it was that same summer they graduated, were able to go on that trip.
They did,
Yeah.
okay.
Probably a level of a contract a student
Yes.
would need to sign that they're going to follow, the directions of the chaperone and the policies of Tewksbury Public Schools and so forth,
They were still
even though
under-
they're no longer enrolled as a student.
Yeah, they were still had to follow all handbook policies, all travel policies as a school.
Brenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bernard, Ms. White, and Bailey, could you just articulate, I fully appreciate the COVID promise from EF. They really have thought out many of the details, but we're talking about two different trips, one international, one domestic. Can you tell me, if a student were to become symptomatic or unfortunately COVID positive, what is the length of quarantine in Costa Rica at this point that they would have to stay and the parent would have to join them because they won't be flying home? And what's the length of stay they'd have to quarantine out in the western part of the country? And I just would ask this, could you just also identify, I know you had planned a meeting with parents to articulate all of this, and hopefully that as well, because I think that's a big piece parents have to realize. If they're going to have to fly to get their child, they will be there for a number of days because they will not be allowed to fly back for several times. So could you just articulate what that length of time is to quarantine?
We are checking at the moment. Our EF reps have not shared that specific length. I do think it varies depending on where we're going, and that's definitely information we can get before these meetings are held. So we do have that information. Both of our EF reps, I think, answer my emails within about 5 minutes of me sending them, so they're pretty on top of it. But I think it just says, yeah, in accordance with local guidance. So we would have to get that information before the
From Costa
meeting.
Rica or from
Okay.
the national parks.
Yeah.
It doesn't define it, it just gives a kind of a broader definition of what's currently in place at the time.
Can I just ask that when you do have your meeting with parents, and I thought it might even be scheduled for tomorrow, is that
We're hoping for tomorrow or Friday.
that we have the...
Waiting for this meeting.
Okay, I think it would be really helpful at least to tell them what the current protocol is, because it could change. I mean, it may be, relieved slightly, or it may be extended. I want to say I think Costa Rica is a 14-day quarantine. I certainly don't want to be quoted on that, but having that information for the parents tomorrow, I think, is going to be helpful in the decision-making.
Absolutely.
Mr. Parsons, any questions?
Appreciate you guys communicating with parents. My biggest concern is that families know what the impact and what they have to do on their end if their child does contract a virus. As long as that's entirely clear to them, and they're okay with that, and that's their decision. And trip sounds like a great opportunity. That said, it's also the priority of our school system is kids' safety. So I'm in agreement with Superintendent Malone that we reserve the right, should the context of this trip change to potentially, hopefully not, cancel the trip if the situation at the time merits that. And that parents understand that as well. Should we decide to do that?
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. I just have a few of my own questions. Having had my daughter over in Italy when all of this pandemic hit, I saw firsthand how quickly EF pivots. So it hit right in central, I want to say it was Rome Day they were going, and that's where it shut down. And this whole thing came to be. And they made them a new plan for that next day. It was seamless. They were just happy to be there, and I was very happy that they were one of the last planes to touch down back here in Boston, and they were safe and sound. So I can attest to the due diligence that they do on their part, and I do appreciate that. I just have a little bit of a concern with now the students that did not originally have to follow the vaccine mandate. Now they're asked to do that. If families don't feel, if they feel strongly that they're not going to vaccinate the student, and I'm looking at the $500 fee, will that be something that will be negotiated with EF Tours, because it was not originally in their agreement prior to signing on to the trip?
I think what we would do then would be encourage students from the Costa Rica trip to get a voucher and transfer to the National Parks trip where there is no vaccine mandate. That'd be the best way they wouldn't lose any money. And the National Parks trip is about that cancellation fee is about the difference in price, more or less. So they would get that money back that way. Would probably be the easiest way to go about it without people still being able to travel, but not necessarily needing that vaccination.
Right, right. Then I was looking through the packet, and I noticed that there is no administrator attending these trips. That has not been the case in the past, and I'm wondering why that is not happening. I'm just thinking that if you have, I believe it was 19 students I saw on the Costa Rica list, and it's 2 or 3 adults, you know, God forbid we have somebody who's quarantining or sick and we need an adult with that person. We're now down to 2 adults. I just am concerned with not having an administrator, and maybe it's a school decision that was done, but it's not something that I've typically seen in the past. Like I know Eileen was, you know, in the past we've had different people on there. I just feel like we need to make sure we have more of a buffer on our staff numbers if, in fact, we do have somebody who falls ill and we need to have some attention given to that student and away from the other groups. I understand they're high school students, they're a little bit older and at that point, you know, able to be on their own some more, but I do feel like if they were to contract the virus over there, that's still somebody's baby that we are taking care of until they can get to them and help them, and we don't know the severity of the illness that they're going through at the time. I just need to make sure that when you have your meeting with the families, I would defer to the families' decisions. It's not, you know, everyone has their own opinions on this, and I would hate to squash these dreams of the students who have been waiting for a few years to do this. That's not my intent at all. I just want to be sure that as a school district that we are sending them over there with all the scaffolded supports that we could, thinking in a pandemic realm of like maybe if we could look and say, is there an administrator that's interested in going with these, is it 2 teachers or 3 teachers on that one? In order to have some more adults there, I think is what concerns me, is the ratio should someone, like I said, get sick.
The reason the numbers are set the way they are is for international trips, for every 6 people, you get a free chaperone spot. So we have 18 travelers, so we have 3 free. Trips in the past have run without administrators. They've been smaller trips like the Costa Rica. I know when they did Puerto Rico a few years ago, it was just Mrs. Dudley and a parent. I know the Canada trip that was supposed to run in 2022 or 2020 that got canceled was just teachers running. So that's kind of where I based the chaperones off of. And then that 4th spot was usually, if we got to 4 chaperones, was an administrator. If we need to change that, we can. I would much rather the trips go they're not, in
Right.
all honesty.
Right.
You can get, and we don't have the numbers, usually EF does a prorated rate for an extra spot, so we could, with what we're going to have to do for the National Parks trip, we're 2 students shy of that 3rd chaperone spot, so we are going to have to pay like 20% of the cost to make sure that we have 3 chaperones there, because that ratio is 10 to 1.
Okay.
We can definitely add another person, but it would be paying the full amount of the trip. We'd be asking somebody to pay the full price to go for an adult.
Right. And so when you have your meeting with the families, you're going to have the same presentation that we have in front of us with the information, and then they'll give you their opinions, and then will you present us or will we get an update to that? Because I just am curious to see how the families feel, because I don't feel as though I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure we're giving them the safest experience, but I also want to be respectful of the families' opinions and the students' opinions, and if they're ready and comfortable to go. But I would like to have some feedback after that meeting.
Okay. Yeah.
Anybody else? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
At this time, we'd ask John Ware to come and speak to us about the Washington, D.C.
Bernard. Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. Mr. Gillespie, the trip advisor, regrets that he can't make it. He had a family commitment. But we're excited and enthusiastic about running this trip again, but we appreciate the fact that there are some complexities that we need to review as we look at some of the effects of the pandemic. If you look at the first slide here, the tour with DC with us does have a COVID-19 sort of bulleted plan, and basically they will facilitate testing, they will facilitate rooming, and they will facilitate getting meals and so on to students. But most of that cost will be pushed onto the consumer, who will have to file a claim with the insurance that covers the extra costs beyond those days that they would normally be there. So the rooming and the food and so on after that point. And our chaperones would be the people who would have to then monitor those students and help those students who may be testing positive or have symptoms and awaiting results. Similar to the other trips that the high school represented, the students would be required to show a result of a negative test 1 to 3 days prior to departure, and the tours are not requiring vaccines at this time. There's some differences between Virginia and DC. Virginia, if a student becomes symptomatic while they're in Virginia, they should test in Virginia and then follow those expectations. But if they were traveling in DC and became symptomatic, we would want to test them there, which is my understanding, and then that would change a little bit the quarantine time. Right now, at this time, in DC, they want you to quarantine 10 days before leaving, and in Virginia, there's no need to quarantine. Like a parent could come and pick a student up in a private vehicle and leave the state of Virginia to return. But in DC, they would like you to stay there, and that's the current guideline. Positive cases would be isolated and monitored for severity of symptoms. Unvaccinated close contacts would need to be quarantined. Symptomatic vaccinated students would need to be tested and quarantined until receiving a negative result. Parent nurses have volunteered to support this administration of student medication on this trip, and that's the way we've done it in the past. But then with the additional idea of this COVID contact tracing, it would add additional responsibility to them. For the purposes of this trip, these nurses, in order to be delegated distribution of medication, they would need to be hired temporarily as substitute nurses for the district. And the nurse licensure compact right now represents 38 states that belong to this compact, and Virginia and Massachusetts do not have reciprocity for delegation of medication. So technically we would need, like a Terksbury nurse could delegate responsibility for delegation of administration of meds in DC, but in Virginia we would need to be under the auspices of a Virginia licensed nurse. So that represents complexity too. Information regarding the trip was provided to parents for sign up on the Tour with DCS website in June. In September, an informational meeting for parents and guardians was held virtually with our trip advisor, Mr. Gillespie, and a representative from the tour company. Other communications throughout the fall have been sent regarding fundraising and rooming arrangements. Currently, we have 168 students, so a lot of enthusiasm and excitement for the trip, and that's great. We have 12 staff members, including myself. I would be going, 8 parent chaperones, 5 of which are registered nurses, and then Mr. Gillespie would be recruiting additional chaperones. He usually doesn't have an issue getting a few more from this point of the year on that are happy to go. Parents were required to purchase the cancel for any reason insurance, and with doing that, the insurance company would reimburse 75% of the cost at any point that we cancel before the trip, and then the company has indicated that they will refund the remainder of the cost to the district minus the cost of the insurance, which was approximately $100. I'm sorry, I didn't advance the slides. So this is the communication slide regarding when we held our meetings. And this was the slide regarding the CFAR insurance.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Questions from the committee members? Ms. Garabedian?
I don't have any questions at this time. That's a phenomenal response. I hope everything goes well.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Parson?
I have none at this time.
Seems pretty clear-cut to me. It seems as though the ratio of staff to students would be appropriate should something happen, if a student needed to be quarantining or anything like that. And I feel as though we have a little bit of we have an edge to get there quicker to them. We can get to them faster. But I definitely appreciate the update, and we'll just kind of hope that we keep plugging along in a positive way, and that these variants don't make it so that we don't have the option to choose. But I do appreciate the frequent and open communication with the families, and just querying them throughout this process to make sure that they're still comfortable and as well. So that's all I have this evening, but I'm going to ask that if Mr. Malone has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ware. Great job. Just a quick recap of something. The nurses on the trip would be able to administer medication in DC. I'm not sure how that perspective goes on the bus going through other states, but
Right.
How long are you in Virginia, and is there a plan that we can manage the nursing situation while in Virginia?
My understanding right now, we're staying in Virginia, that's where the hotel is, so there would be an issue with delegating medication there without a nurse that's hired with a Virginia license to support the delegation of that, so that would be an additional cost.
Additional cost, but that barrier could be...
Yes, Mr. Gillespie's working with the tour company right now to see if they can allocate someone down there, willing to take this on. It would be as a support position in order to then be able to support the administration of
That's
medication.
not a COVID issue. That's a management issue of the complexity of going between different states and medication distribution, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Regan?
Thank you, Mr. Ware. And you clearly have a long lead time now to think this through, which is wonderful. But I think it's only fair to ask the same question. Has the protocol for quarantining, the length of time, been explored between Virginia and D.C.? Because I think, and I assume you're going to have another parent meeting to articulate all these finer details so they understand that if they're called upon to come to either state to pick up their child, Virginia, I think you said Virginia allows the child to get into the car with the parent and drive home.
Correct.
D.C., do we have a quarantine period that they would require the child and parent?
From the current information is that it would be a 10-day stay, that the student shouldn't leave D.C. If they had to test there and had to stay in D.C., then they would have to stay in D.C. for 10 days.
Okay, and then because, when we think about it, they're in D.C. most of the day doing their touring. How does the CF tour help with rooming and lodging for the family when the student, if the student is symptomatic and quarantined in D.C.?
My understanding is that they would have to find a room. They in their agreement, say they'll facilitate rooming for a student that needs to be tested. But again, if that extends beyond the trip, any of those costs, the parent would have to pay up front, but then would file a claim for reimbursement.
Okay. Thank you.
I do think just one thing to consider too is if there are large numbers of students, then it does create a different situation if there happens to be a spread, of how many chaperones would need to be pulled from the groups in order to, stay with those students. I just think that's something to consider.
Okay. Do you have a planned date to articulate
We don't have a date.
these details with parents?
We wanted to present at this meeting, get that information out through this process, and then we'll set one up shortly.
Thank you.
I'll speak with Mr. Gillespie about that.
Excellent. Thank you very much for
All right,
coming
well,
in
thank
and
you very
joining
much,
us this
too.
evening. It was nice seeing you.
Nice to see you, and thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on in our agenda, it takes us up to our citizens forum. Is there anyone wishing to speak on anything on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next order of business, which is the approval of minutes from our clerk, Ms. Garabedian.
I make a motion to approve our meeting minutes for Wednesday, November 17th, 2021, as written.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. Oh, I'm sorry to have it. This is my first time, people.
So I motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
I'll second.
I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 17th, 2021. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of November 17th, 2021. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye as well. Minutes are approved. Staying with you, Ms. Garabedian, for our submission and payment of bills.
Okay. I move the school department payroll for the period ending 11/10/2021 to be approved and certified in the amounts and categories as shown for a total amount of $1,446,568.11.
I will make that motion.
She made the motion.
Oh, I'll second. Sorry.
I have a motion and a second to approve the payroll ending November 10th, 2021 in the amount of $1,446,568.11. All those in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ms. Garabedian?
Okay. I move the school department payroll for the period ending 11/24/2021 to be approved and certified in the amounts and categories as shown for a total amount of $1,562,053.37.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the payroll period ending November 24th, 2021 in the amount of $1,562,053.37. All those in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye as well. Next, we move on in our agenda to the superintendent and staff report. I'll turn the floor over to our superintendent for his report this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just obviously a quick update on some of the impact of the pandemic on the schools. Certainly, this continues to challenge us. We continue to look at the best opportunities to keep students and staff safe. Our COVID tracker number as of today was over 90, which is a significant gain, particularly directly related to coming out of the Thanksgiving Day holiday. It's not out of line with what we're seeing in surrounding districts and across the state, but it is still concerning to have a number that large. Obviously, we're doing a significant amount of testing, test and stay protocol, so we're doing those type pieces, which is really going to identify those. But once again, we want to keep a close eye on this piece. I sent a letter out to families last Friday, just outlining some of the additional cleaning protocols and other things we're doing. I've been in conversations with building principals to look at all aspects of the daily operation of the school to see where we can maximize space, where we can maximize opportunities to ensure we have a safe environment for students. You know, some of our schools are pretty crowded, but we're looking at options that we can do that. We want to find any way that we can kind of get the trend in these numbers going down. Again, really hoping that parents can help us by keeping your child home if they're sick, work with the school nurses around testing. Our school nurses are really the true heroes here. They've been working endless hours, managing the test and stay, managing the contact tracing, doing all those pieces, significant hours beyond the school day, and we really appreciate everything they're doing on that. We'll continue to look at preventive measures and increase where we need to increase. We'll also continue to collaborate with the DESE COVID response team. If we got into a scenario where we were looking at particular classroom closures or even school closures, that is something we have to coordinate with DESE on that and basically seek their approval on that piece. But they're also a great consulting voice on that. They have some additional assets they can put in our way, towards us if we're looking at that. So we keep in close contact with them. You know, it's every day becomes the new normal of what does over 90 cases mean? How does that impact us on instruction and school safety and all those pieces? So we'll keep a close eye on it, but this pandemic is not going away anytime soon. So it's going to be an everyday management piece, so we'll absolutely keep an eye on it. Ms. Reagan will talk a little bit about, in her report, vaccination clinics and some other pieces that we're working on. The current vaccination rates for the town, which goes by age range that don't specify whether the child is in our school district or not, but specifies age groups at the town level. Between the ages of 5 to 11, which is a new category, if you recall, that category was not there before, the town is at a 23% rate, and again, that's just come out, so hopefully that will continue to grow. The 12 to 15 age range, that was in the mid-50s. It is now up to 60%, so we have some growth there. And at the 16 to 19 range, that continues at about the 77% range. We'll be reaching out to staff probably early next week, try to determine their vaccination status so we can begin that process. Once we've established that, we'll look at the probability of reaching out to parents and families to look at what the student vaccination status is. Again, that would be a voluntary disclosure by staff or parents, but it would give us specific numbers that we could look at to verify to move forward if we get close to that 80% rate that DESE has described, where if an individual school reaches 80% vaccination rate, those who are vaccinated in the school, staff and students do no longer have to wear the mask inside. So our town data tells us maybe we're not quite there yet, but we're probably on the doorstep with some of the older students, so it's certainly worth pursuing. Also, we've received our latest update on NESDEC for enrollment projections, which we get annually, and we partner with NESDEC and pay for that service. And what they're showing over the next 5 years is the same kind of trend they've been putting forward, which we've kind of gone to that lower point of a steady decline, and now it will be a little bit of a rise over the next few years, minimal, but on the rise nonetheless, where we've been on a little bit of a decline piece. It's a little hard to, in our district, we're prone to having these pockets of numbers that impact us at a particular grade level, that then again impact us at some of our smaller elementary schools, depending on what part of town they're on. The opening of the new school will have a significant impact of leveling that out, because we'll have students across the town together at an earlier grade level than we currently do. So that will help us on that piece, but we'll certainly keep an eye on that. Quick staffing update. Thank you to Precision HR, who is our partner in providing one-on-one special education aides in the district. And they've done some recent additional hires that have brought our staffing level up in that particular area up to better than it has been in a while, so we're certainly appreciative of that. We are certainly still searching for aides, substitutes, any assets that can help out our nurses. We're looking for those pieces continually. Also a reminder that the MIAA has put out some requirements around interscholastic athletics for the winter season, in that they will require masks for student athletes, coaches, and officials in all venues. And that would be regardless if that's at a particular school or at an off-site location. If it's governed by MIAA, there has to be masks. Thank you also to AlphaBest, who is looking at operating at a full day of services on December 23rd, which is an early release day for us. They got some feedback from parents that they'd like a full day of care up to 6 o'clock, so they'll be operating up to 6 o'clock on that day, so thank you to them. One word for the committee, and that is Waffles. And Waffles is our new comfort dog, courtesy of the Tewksbury Police Department. We hope to have an in-person visit by Waffles in a meeting soon. But again, we knew from Officer Hanley when he presented that this was going to be a long process about getting the dog and then training the dog. But the dog is here. So we're further along in that process, and we hope everyone will be able to meet Waffles. We're continuing to look with our schools and our school leaders around school security. Certainly in reflection of what we've all seen has gone out in Michigan lately, we want to make sure we're reviewing all of our ALICE protocols, looking at those pieces, but it's also really taking that extra effort to make connections with all students, looking at the social, emotional, and clinical aspects of our students, and really looking through that lens so that we can support any of our students who are in need, but also have a high visibility and a high inspection rate for what's going on with our schools security-wise. And just a final reminder that Friday, December 17th at 6:30, here at Tewksbury Memorial High School in the auditorium will be the winter concert with Tewksbury Memorial High School Band and Chorus. So looking forward to that. Again, one more element we're getting into where we're having in-person activities, great experiences for kids and families, and we're creeping back on that, so we want to continue with that trend. That completes my report, Madam Chair.
Excellent. I'll open up for any questions or comments from my colleagues. Ms. Garavedian?
Thank you for your report. It was great, Mr. Malone. In terms of the numbers that we're seeing in the schools, are any of those from pool testing, or are they all just?
A good number from pool testing. So we're getting in test and stay.
Okay.
So we're getting both. Okay. So we're trying to look at any comparisons that may lead us to think that there's a school spread going on. The numbers across the 7 schools, we also have transportation in there, we have outplay students, but across the 7 schools has been bouncing heavy in one school one week, heavy in the next school the next, so it's been bouncing around a little bit. So we want to make sure if we have a school that's been really high for a couple of weeks, does that impact a particular classroom, grade level, all those kind of things, and looking at that. We haven't quite seen that yet, but if the numbers keep going up, that's inevitable. We haven't seen strong evidence of school spread, but with over 90 cases, some of those it's just going to be really hard to determine whether there was an in-school spread or not in-school spread, particularly if they're coming off of test and stay because somebody was identified as a close contact, whether that close contact was outside of school, inside of school, whatever, and then the pool testing starts that. So yeah, we're getting a lot of that is coming from both the pool testing and the test and stay.
Well, a big shout out to the staff that are working with those people because that's a huge undertaking. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garabedian. Mr. Parson?
Just given that if a student's a close contact or they contract the virus, while they're at home, what kind of supports are in place to keep that student on track if they're able to? What kind of supports could parents look for, especially at the younger grades where technology access might not be as easy as, like, say, a high schooler? And then is there some clear, reasonable expectations on the staff end of how to distribute that work to those students?
Great question. So DESC has not approved any remote learning opportunity. So what we experienced last year in a hybrid model was a student would shift kind of to total remote, connect with their class because half the class would be connecting anyways remotely. That's not available, and DESE has not approved that. Thankfully, we haven't seen extended issues because of test and stay, because of vaccination rates. We haven't seen extended isolation periods, but isolations are absolutely still happening. So what our guidelines right now with the staff is to make connections with the family. And certainly, depending on the grade level and the age range, provide that work available, but have those connections. DESE has put in a piece that if students X amount of interaction with the students at home directly does not count as an absence for the student. What that looks like, how that gets managed is a little bit different. You know, we don't right now do the remote access into the classroom. We could talk to the union about that opportunity for students who are out. That was a much clearer line last year because they were doing it anyways. It was just shifting a student who would have been in front of you to the other half of the class who's remote. Now that not everyone, no one has a remote portion of their class on any given day, that option isn't there. But it's, we're concerned if a student is out for a significant period of time on isolation. I think our staff have been doing a pretty good job about connecting with the student, connecting with that family, but there is no replacement for in-person learning. There just isn't.
Okay. As long as they have the work they're missing and the opportunity to do it at home, you know, that's no different than just being out sick for a week.
Right, and we've identified those students who are out in that situation through our own attendance period, whether DESE would count that. We understand if they're out for isolation, we've told them you can't be in.
Okay.
Because you need to isolate. So we work with the students on that.
Great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Just a couple of things. Mr. Malone, you know that how I feel about enrollment, and I'm very happy to hear the projected slight increase, if even slight is positive. So thank you for that information. Curious, with the MIAA, you said mask wearing for the winter season. Are they going to be allowing spectators this season?
Great. There is, that had originally come out by leagues last year, and the Merrimack Valley League determined, as most other leagues around us determined, that there would not be fans. MIAA has not ruled on fans.
Okay.
Leagues have not ruled on fans. We don't anticipate a restriction on fans. Something could change either in the numbers or other pieces like that, or there could be something about a particular venue that maybe doesn't make sense. I don't know.
Right.
But as of right now, in the Merrimack Valley Conference, there is no active discussion about limiting fans to sporting events.
Okay.
They would have to follow the
mask mandate,
protocols that are put in place.
Perfect. And that's everything I have for this evening. I'm glad to hear that the percentages are growing in the vaccination rates, and our schools are plugging along and open in-person learning. So thank you very much. Ms. Regan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My first update is that this Friday, we did send this email home, but it bears reiterating. This Friday, December 10th, from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., there will be a second dose Pfizer vaccination clinic at the Senior Center. This clinic will serve our first dose Pfizer vaccination recipients only, especially those that attended the November 19th clinic. I just want you to be aware, on the November 19th clinic at the Senior Center, there were 288 Terksbury Public School community members, parents, staff, as well as our younger students who now have availability of the Pfizer pediatric vaccination. Also, with the upcoming vacation and the holiday season, you can imagine we're receiving questions and requests from parents and staff on where are other available clinics? When will other clinics be available to our youngest students. And while we don't have anything planned at the senior center in the pipeline, we did send out communications today how parents can use the VaxFinder or an invite from our partner, the Valley Collaborative, for some potentially limited but available appointments. So we'll continue to share that information with our Tewksbury Public School community, as well as update our dashboard with pertinent information that families may need. Last week, and again, thank you to the committee, myself, Principal Terry Garish, Principal Felicia Chinanovich, and Principal Judy McGinnis attended the CASE annual conference in Chatham, Massachusetts. CASE is the Massachusetts Organization of Local Title I Receiving Districts that focuses on both ELA and math literacy for all students, and especially for students of need. CASE brings in nationally renowned speakers and presenters that focus on these literacy strategies that Title I districts can use for their students, as well as there's an opportunity to meet with vendors of literacy resources, and then opportunities to network with other districts about what strategies and resources are we using to improve literacy, both math and ELA, for all of our students, and especially our language learners as well. That was probably the highlight for us as a district, because we were able to network with many districts about what ELA resources are they using and where they've seen success. This is the last year of our 6-year Journeys ELA program contract for grades K through 6. Now, we had in our plan to pilot last year and to research and look at piloting for this school year so we could implement next school year. Well, as you can imagine, the pandemic has certainly wreaked havoc on our entire curriculum resource updating, both ELA and math. So this year, we implemented, as you know, the K through 1 math curriculum units, as well as Foundations, a program we needed to partner with our ELA program. So we've convened our principals as well as our district literacy coach to begin that process and looking at what that timeline and process will be for Tewksbury Public Schools. Whether we have the ongoing availability of Journeys resources, which we do, into next school year, and what will be the best fit for Tewksbury. We've not only convened those principals and the district literacy coach, we have invited our K through 6 teachers to take a survey to join us in planning of the timeline, what process fits well. We need to hear teachers' voices in this process and certainly need their involvement. So that survey will be going out prior to the holiday break so we can do some planning with the administrative team. We also have, because of the networking we did with other districts, we're planning and scheduling some observations of some of the most successful ELA programs in place right now in other districts. In particular, 2 of the ones we want to see are the L reading resource and Wonders. We also will look at the successor resource to Journeys into reading. But as I said, we've reached out to our teachers and our entire team to give us some feedback, and perhaps where their child goes to school, maybe they've seen great success with the ELA reading program. So be prepared to hear more on this. Our timeline, we know we have to make a move on the ELA reading curriculum, and I'll report to you what our plan is at an upcoming meeting.
Regan?
And then one last update, if I would, and it's in really little print here, but it's a really big one, and that is, for anyone who's paying attention, just as a reminder, December 23rd is an early release day for our students, and it's a workshop day for our teachers, and then the December recess spans from December 24th through January 2nd, and school will resume on January 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Regan. I'll turn to my colleagues. Ms. Garabedian, any questions?
I don't have any
comments?
questions. I look forward to the updates with ELA.
Yes.
Mr. Parson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have any questions, just a comment that the looking into piloting in the ELA just really sparks my love. And so if you ever need anyone from school committee to join in, I'd be more than happy
You're invited.
to do so. I want to
Thank you.
invite myself onto anything, but that would be a hint. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate your comments this evening. Mr. Libby,
I'm just
we will give you a minute to get settled, and
Technical.
then the floor will be yours.
set up worked out here.
Yes, thank you. We're moving along on the agenda.
You're doing great.
So I have a presentation on the Heathbrook window project with some pictures of the progress we've made there, of the work we've done in 20 classrooms at the school. This first picture here on the left is sort of a before picture from the outside of the school. You see the sort of the beige inside of the window area. Those are the blinds. They were very old, sort of discolored. See, they're all pulled down. The windows were not see-through anymore. They were plexiglass, and they had become discolored over time. This is a picture from the outside of what the school looks like now. We have real tempered glass windows in place. All these windows are operable. They can open with screens. These panels are in place to support any rooms that need air conditioning or additional ventilation down the road, or currently for students, for student or staff needs. That skipped through the picture of the inside of the classroom, but all the classrooms are equipped with blinds so that teachers can control the amount of light that comes in the room. This is sort of with the blinds down on this side, with the blinds open on this side. The doors are also equipped with blinds. Again, this is a close-up of the window, blind down, blind open. And again, this is that row of windows in the middle of the wall of windows that's shown as operable. It can only open, safety regulations will only allow for the window to open, I believe it's 4 inches, but it does provide some additional ventilation in the classroom. The old windows, there were 2 operable windows in each classroom. So we have 6 now, provide a greater amount of ventilation in the classrooms. We also, part of the project was to replace the countertop that was adjacent to that window. We think we'll do some painting as well in the classrooms to kind of just spruce it up and finish it off probably this summer to finish off the project. There's still some window, what's the word, caulking that's left to be done and finishing up, but the project's basically done. We've noticed an improvement, at least from our end, on our heating system, a much more steady temperature control since the system's been in place. We haven't hit the real cold weather yet, but those rooms were very high-low temperatures depending on what was going on outside. Mr. Marchand from the maintenance department has reported that pretty steady 70 degrees in all those classrooms since we've hit the sort of the heating season. So seems to be helping in that area as well. So project's basically complete, and just wanted to share some pictures of the work that we did there and show you what all the support you've given us was able to provide for the students there. That was
Excellent.
my report for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Libby. I will turn it over to Ms. Garabedian for questions or comments.
So thank you so much, Mr. Libby, but we had an opportunity to tour the schools sometime this summer, end of the spring last year. It was so exciting to be in those schools with real windows.
Oh.
And to be able to see outside and have the light inside the classroom. So it's the pictures don't even do it justice. I think it's a huge improvement. Is there any plans for the library at the Heathbrook?
Yeah, we're actually looking at so there was the 7 greenhouse rooms that we call them that didn't have this type of window. And we're asking the company that did this design to come up with a design for those rooms as well. We haven't seen those plans yet back from them, but we'll tackle the library with them as well. Because the library has that same problem with the plexiglass windows that have become opaque over time.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. It's great work.
Thank you, Ms. Garabedian. Mr. Parsons?
I have none at this time. Bridget took the words right out of my mouth. Pictures don't do it justice, and it's a much better, brighter, cheerier place to learn for sure. Great project.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. And just, I echo the sentiments of my colleagues that is a huge improvement, and I'm very excited for the staff and students that will be in those rooms on a daily basis. I think when you have that comfortable surroundings, be it the heat and seeing outside, imagine, outside the windows, it really kind of sets the tone for your learning in the classroom. And be excited to see when the project is completely finished with the painting this summer, if maybe you could take some pictures to share with us once all the painting and caulking is finished as well.
Absolutely.
I have, living in that greenhouse room for 19 years, I appreciate the fact that there are windows to be opened, and I'm happy for the staff members and the students that can open them, because it does get hot and cold in those rooms.
Yep.
So thank you for sharing. I think pictures say 1,000 words, and it just warms my heart to see it. So thank you, and thank you to everyone that was involved in making this happen.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the next item on our agenda this evening, which is our consent agenda. I'll open it up to my colleagues. Does anyone have any questions or comments on any of the items on the consent agenda?
No questions.
I have none at this time.
Seeing none, I'd ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye as well. Tonight's consent agenda is approved as presented. Let's move along to the committee reports. I will begin for us with the Elementary School Building Committee. The committee will be meeting again tomorrow night, December 9th, at the Town Hall. Where the project is now is that we are still on track for a substantial completion date of October 28th, 2022. The construction crew is working to get the building envelope closed in by December. The window installation and roofing is in process now, and there's going to be ongoing work in the north and east classroom wings. It is all coming together, and it's exciting to witness this for our town. And that is my Elementary School Building Committee update for this evening. I will turn it over to Mr. Parsons for the Terksbury Cpac update.
The Cpac will not be meeting in December as originally planned. Their next meeting is January 20th, and at their previous meeting, it was agreed upon that the school committee designees and the Cpac will meet monthly for a half-hour check-in, just to improve communication and relations there.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. We don't have Mr. Statman for the Wellness Advisory Committee.
Oh, that's me.
Would that be you, Ms. Garabedian?
I don't really have an update for the Wellness Advisory, other than our next meeting is set for March 23rd, 2022, where we had to cancel our November meeting. The hopes were we could still schedule something else, but we have yet to be able to find a time to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Parsons, any update on the policy subcommittee?
None at this time.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is the policy changes, proposals, and adoptions, and seeing that we have none, we can move right on to our old business. Ms. Regan, would you like to speak to us regarding old business?
I would. Actually, I'm very excited to report to you. If you remember back in August, we delivered our district goals to the committee, and a large focus, in fact, the #1 priority of the district goals was around student social-emotional learning, in fact, prioritizing their sense of belonging at school and in the classroom, which is a key component we all know of student engagement and certainly their success at school. We also informed you that we would be implementing a screener, a measure or assessment of social-emotional growth. This screener that you're seeing tonight in the packet is the Aperture DESA SEL screener. It's a strengths-based measure. Focuses on SEL strengths and then also on the needs of our students. The DESA SEL, and DESA stands for the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment, is the gold standard in SEL measuring. As I said, it not only screens for strengths, also needs. It provides scores and profiles on each individual student, on classrooms, on whole schools, and then it provides SEL growth strategies, activities, and lessons for students. I'm going to focus on the two different sizes. There's a K through 8 SEL and then a 9 through 12. If you remember in my update, I talked about December 23rd being a early release for students, but a workshop day for teachers. We will be giving our teachers training on utilizing the DESA SEL, and then the time needed for K through 8 to actually measure their students. We'll have plenty of time in that day to do that. Let me turn the page here. I'm going to ask you to turn to page 2 so that you can see some of the types of questions the DESA SEL asks. And they, I'm going to show you in a minute, they focus on the CASEL core competencies, the social-emotional learning, 5 core competencies, and DESA breaks it down a little bit further even. But there is a rating screener for school use and parent use. We're not sure quite yet, and we need to explore how we'll be using the screener for parents as well, because we know we see strengths in school that parents may not be seeing at home and vice versa, or needs at school that maybe parents aren't seeing, in a more at-home environment. So we are very excited to explore the tool further, first implementing with our students and teachers, and then how this plays out with our parents. If I could turn your attention to page 4. The outer ring are the CASEL 5 core competencies, and I'm just going to describe them a little bit for you so you're aware of what this assessment's actually measuring. The first core competency is self-awareness, and you can see that DESA has broken that down into two core components. And self-awareness really is a student describing how he or she is feeling, being able to do that, asking for help or feedback. And then you can see that another core component DESA looks at is optimistic thinking. If a student can say good things about him or herself, and you can see the examples of these core competencies on page 3. The second core competency is self-management. Pretty self-explanatory. How can a student wait his or her turn, stay calm when faced with a challenge, or adjust well to changes? And then also goal-directed behavior, very important, especially as a student gets older in age. Can they seek out additional information, take steps to achieve goals set for them, especially around behavior? If we look at the competency 3, responsible decision-making, again broken down into 2 core competencies, responsible decision-making, and then personal responsibility. And you can see some examples of that again on page 3. 4, relationship skills. This is really important, not only at school, but with peers, and that is a CASEL core competency. Can a student compliment or congratulate another student? Offer to help someone right? Being a member of the community. And then, of course, social awareness. And that's core competency 5. How do they get along with different types of people, cooperate with peers and siblings, forgive somebody that hurt them, those skills that you need to be successful in the class and at school and in life. So if we turn to page 6, or actually just looking at page 5, if you remember in the summer I told you that Aperture partners with some of the most successful research-based programs around social emotional learning. And you can see the at least the 6 programs here that they use. They pull hundreds of lessons from these research-based programs, Open Circle, Collaborative Classroom, Second Step, and so on. You can see them there, and particularly align them to the needs of the measurement tool. It helps the teacher know, is this a whole class need? What's the lesson for that need? And maybe it's around personal responsibility. Or is this an individual or small group need? And then the lessons and activities are aligned. So for K through 8, on page 6, you can see there's a DESA Mini. It's an 8-item quick assessment that's done on every student, and it's teacher assessed. So the teacher does that. Each assessment takes about 60 seconds. So if you consider a typical classroom of maybe 20, 25 students, we're looking at about a half hour to screen the whole class. The DESA Full has additional items that might be used by our therapists, people working directly with the student, or students with greater need. If you turn to page 8, our implementation of the K through 8 DESA SEL will be all K through 8 schools, all K through 8 students. We'll be training all of our teachers and giving all K through 8 teachers that time on December 23rd to do the mini on all of their students. We expect to expand our use of this tool into year 2, and as we explore and implement, we'll be able to come back and update you on that. We expect to do this year 2 to 3 ratings on every student, and then look more closely at what interventions or remediation around needs need to be done with those students as well. If you move to page 9, I'm going to just share with you some of the differences with the DESA 9 through 12 SEL. This assessment captures student voice through a high school edition student self-report. So the student takes the assessment. And again, it's aligned to the CASEL core competencies, and it breaks it down into those 8 components. And then it provides immediate strategies. For example, goal-setting strategies, SMART goals that students attain little pieces along the way to help build their competencies. We will be training our high school teachers and support staff on the 23rd as well. And then in early January, prior to our January 14th workshop day, our high school students will be taking the DESA SEL in an advisory block. So we'll have all students' data for the high school. And then finally, I will turn your attention to the back page, the final page, just to share our implementation plan for the high school. We, as I said, intend on every single student participating in this assessment approximately 2 times this year. We'll see if we can push that further. We'll certainly be training all of our teachers in January on how we look at the data, so then we can further explore how do we start planning out those lessons, and for the high school, those strategies in time that they meet with their counselors, guidance counselors in particular, or others, advisors, to build on those SMART goals that this sets out for them. So it's a process. Very excited to finally be at an implementation phase. In fact, our leadership team will be trained next week. All of the principals, they're the site leads, as well as our family and student support, Ms. Baker O'Brien, myself, will be trained in how we really implement this and how we can support our teachers and our families. And I'm really looking forward to bringing on, we've never had an assessment like this before. What I'm most excited is it's going to help us get to know our students better. we're going to know their strengths, because that's what we really want to capitalize is on what are their strengths. And then when we know their strengths and they can use those in the class, we work with them on their needs. And we know that it will help us know, are we really meeting the needs we think we are, and supporting all students feeling a sense of belonging and building on the skills they need to be successful in class. So again, this is something that we talked about in the summer, and we're at that place to finally implement, and I'm very excited as a district. Our principals are as well, and I think with our teachers so committed to building on our students' social emotional learning, I think this is going to be a great tool for all of them as well.
Thank you, Ms. Regan. I'll turn to my colleagues for any questions or comments. Ms. Garabedian?
I'm so excited to see some movement forward on how the district can better serve students in a social emotional way. So this is great. I just would love to hear more feedback as this moves forward and how the data can be implemented and what that looks like. So I recognize where you're at now and where you're going. So any feedback you could give us would be great, because I'd love to hear more. Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Garabedian. Mr. Parsons?
This is amazing. I wish I had this in my classroom. Just in the interest of carrying this out with some fidelity and implementation, will teachers have time during PD to do their screening? My only concern is that potentially if it was another thing to do, it wouldn't be done well. Can you speak on that at all?
Sure. Well, in K through 8, it's a teacher-driven measurement, right? And we know there's also a parent component, which we haven't delved into. We really look forward to doing that as well, because we want to partner both sets of data. We have scheduled the time during our workshop time. We're making sure they have the time to do it outside of class time. We also know that should we need to look at the full assessment for particular students, we will use the supports we have in our school to support that need. So, for example, we have new social school adjustment counselors, we have some social workers, we have interns, and the goal, Karen Baker O'Brien is working with them to support classrooms when we know what particular needs we have with individuals. So I think there's a lot, first there's a lot for us to learn. I really am excited about reporting to in January. What did we learn in December? And then where are we in January? Again, that's a workshop day where we'll look at the data. And Aperture will walk us through how to do it, and then what do we do once we have that. They'll also be working, as I said, with the site leaders on looking at, you know, the whole school class and individual data so they can work with the supports in the school. So time is important. And it's really important that we put that time into the schedule of our workshop time this school year, just so we can learn about it and then plan for the second year of implementation.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. I'm happy to hear that we're prioritizing the PD for the teachers in regards to the social emotional rollout. I'm excited to see what the data that comes back from Aperture and see what we can do to better support all those students' needs. I guess I might have missed, I heard you say that the leadership team is going to be trained next week. So am I interpreting it correctly that it's sort of a train the trainer type of a PD where now the building leaders will go back and then do the PD with their own buildings? Am I interpreting that correctly or no?
Nope. There will be a training with the building site leader, which are the principals, and like I said, Karen, myself, as a site leader role. So how do you look at the data, monitor the data? So there's, and I would be lying if I told you I know all of the details of the training, but there is a different site leader training, and then there's the rater, the teacher, the rater, the person who does the assessment training. And at the high school, it's training the teachers to really be facilitators while the students, how does the student log in? Well, how do you give them direction? So again, as I said, every person will be trained specifically to their need, whichever group they fit. And then they'll have time to work that out on the same workshop day in December. And then the only difference here for the high school is Mr. Bernard will provide an advisory block so students have the time. And if you see, it takes about 7 minutes. An advisory block is 30. So there'll be plenty of time embedded for them to, even clunking through it for the first time.
Right, right. Excellent. I appreciate the clarification.
Sure.
Moving on the agenda, we have no new business this evening. The next thing on our list would be school committee matters of interest. We'll start with Ms. Garabedian.
I don't have anything to add tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Parsons?
I have nothing to share tonight.
And I have nothing to share as well. Future school committee meetings dates: January 12th, 2022, February 16th, 2022 is our public hearing on the budget. March 16th, 2022 is the public hearing on the budget. Future subcommittee and advisory committee meeting dates that are upcoming: the Elementary School Building Committee is tomorrow, December 9th, 2021. Just a reminder that the Terksbury Cpac is not meeting in December, that their next meeting will be January 20th, 2022, then February 17th, 2022, March 17th, 2022, April 28th, 2022, May 19th, 2022, and then they'll be having elections on June 16th, 2022. The Terksbury Cpac School Safety Subcommittee will be date to be determined. The Wellness Advisory Committee is due to meet on March 23rd, 2022, May 18th, 2022, and the Policy Subcommittee will to be determined. Future agenda items for my colleagues here tonight. Ms. Garabedian, any future agenda items?
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Parsons?
None at this time.
I have none at this time as well. Do I have a motion and a second to adjourn the December 8th, 2021 regular school committee meeting?
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn tonight's meeting at 8:19 p.m. All those in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Mr. Parsons, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Garabedian, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I vote as well. It is unanimous, but that is a unanimous vote. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you. And thank you for your patience tonight while I plugged along chairing the meeting.
You did great.